On February 2nd, the dragon raised its head, and the top of Zhongshan, which had been purified for hundreds of years, was extremely lively. Since Mishi, bull's-eyed golden flowers have fallen from the clouds one by one, the music bursts out, the fragrance overflows, and guests come and go. Emperor Zhongshan laughed for a whole day, and received gifts all day. His jaw and arms were a little sore. His youngest daughter is just 200 years old since she was born. It is said that the banquet does not need to be so lively, but a few days ago, the little girl who looked like a loach suddenly turned into a human body. For Zhongshan dragon god's lineage, it is considered a top priority. It is unavoidable to invite the gods from all over the world to have a drink. Seeing that the sun was rising and more guests came to congratulate him, Emperor Zhongshan's face was numb from laughing. I don't know why, I was always a little absent-minded today, and called the wrong visitor's title several times. Fortunately, there was priest Chi Nan at the side to smooth things over, but there was no big mistake. After finally finding some free time, Emperor Zhongshan looked at the rising sun and couldn't help but sighed in a low voice, "Akui really won't come back." Chi Nan said with a smile, "The little princess has been born at the age of 200. Why doesn't Madam come to such a happy event?" "Emperor, relax your mind, don't worry too much." The emperor was still worried. She must still be mad at me for inviting people from the Tongshan clan to the banquet, but Shan Shan is innocent, she only shows love to me and is nothing more than courtesy. This silly Akui, why bother fighting with me until now? Chi Nan smiled and lowered his eyes, and secretly brushed away the goosebumps on his arms. After following the emperor for hundreds of thousands of years, he still couldn't get used to his accent. The emperor is fine with everything else, but this sentimental tone can never be changed. Seeing one loves the other, everyone says that they are in love and stop at courtesy. He was defeated. Even the little immortals on the 3 fairy islands of Yingzhou, the farthest abbot of Penglai, knew that Emperor Zhongshan was one of the most difficult emperors to mess with. To be called an emperor by the heavenly emperor, their status is no small matter. The key is that their Zhongshan dragon lineage is definitely not comparable to other dragon gods from all over the world. The ancient emperor of heaven said, when a dragon fights in the wild, its blood is black and yellow. He was talking about the lineage of Zhongshan dragon god. There were rumors that the previous emperor Zhongshan had some quarrels with the Phoenix clan above the 9 heavens, and in a fit of rage, he completely exiled the Sea of Lihen in the far west into eternal darkness, and it is still bleak and cold to this day. Is entrenched by countless fierce evil spirits, and the ordinary Protoss will be seriously injured if they get close, so you have been sealed as a forbidden area by the Emperor of Heaven. This is the dominance of the Lord of 10,000 dragons, but look at the Emperor in front of him. Chi Nan sighed silently. Sighing, what should be appeased is still to be appeased, Chi Nan persuaded, there are countless guests here, the Emperor is still cautious, not to mention the little princess is so talented, the Emperor should be open-minded, how can he frown? The bloodline of the Zhongshan dragon god is different from other dragon gods. He was born as a dragon, and he often spends 500 or 600 years in the dragon pond on the top of Zhongshan before he can transform into a human form. Today's emperor, as well as Xialongjun, only got human body around 500 years old. The little princess can get human form at only 200 years old. S prestige. He repeatedly brought out the little princess to talk about things, and finally touched the sentimental heart of Emperor Zhongshan. He was about to ask the female officer to hug her daughter and make a kiss. Suddenly, he felt a weak force pulling his sleeve. The emperor lowered his head and saw his son Qingjian leaned against his legs, looking up at himself with a childish face. I want daddy to hug me. Qingjian reached out to hug him in a childish voice. Emperor Zhongshan smiled, and Fang wanted to pick up his son, only to hear the ceremony officer sing loudly, 3 princesses of Tongshan, come to congratulate me. But I saw auspicious clouds flying at the gate of the palace, and a group of gods floated in with a mighty group of gods. The goddess at the head was wearing a pale heavenly robe, and I don't know how many stars from the Milky Way were embedded in the cuffs, shaking the whole Zhongshan mountain. Bright. Seeing Emperor Zhongshan, her eyes were rippling, she bowed shyly and timidly, and called out softly, Dai Jun. This call made Emperor Zhongshan's heart ache, and he couldn't help walking up to her, and said, Shan Shan. Qi Nan looked down at Qinjian. The child's arms were still stretched out in a daze, but he didn't wait for his father to hug him. He could only sigh in his heart again, squatted down, and said softly, Mr. Xiaolong, the emperor has too many guests to entertain today, why don't you go and see the little princess? The innocent Qinjian was really moved, and waved his arms again and again, look at my sister. Look at my sister. The female fairy behind immediately stepped forward to hug him away, blocking his sight with her body, so as not to teach him to see the appearance of Emperor Zhongshan holding the hands of the three princesses of Tongshan. Now that the three princesses of Tongshan came, the emperor must not be in the mood to greet other guests, so Qi Nan had no choice but to take his place, busy like a spinning top. Until the sky gradually darkened and hour fell, there was still no sign of Madame showing up. Qi Nan thought that she would definitely not come back. Madame is the daughter of Qihi River God. In terms of status, she is indeed a member of the lineage of Zhongshan Dragon God. This is also a heart problem of her own. In addition, after the marriage of God, she still can't get rid of her sentimental temperament. Noisy, probably tired this time, let her be quiet. However, these protoss, big and small, are all messed up in all likelihood. For a long time, with their extremely gorgeous faces and figures, which one is not emotionally cut and messed up? Love one today, hate another tomorrow. Anyway, there are incomparably long years for them to pretend to be entangled. No matter what pre-marriage and post-marriage, it is rare for a protoss like Madame to be so serious. At the right time, the fairies came out of the side hall with the little princess in their arms. She got a human body at only 200 years old, and the little princess looked more like a mortal baby. Her small body was wrapped in a brocade quilt made of gold silk, with a magnificent and complicated golden lock on her chest, and she fell asleep deeply. While sucking his fingers in his mouth, it's so cute. Qinjian jumped up and down and followed her all the way, trying to reach her with his hands, shouting excitedly, Fan Tuan! Fan Tuan! Huge admiration echoed among the guests. Previously, everyone thought that Emperor Zhongshan had praised Hai Cao. How could there be a dragon girl who was born at the age of 200? Seeing it now, it turned out to be true. Many old gods couldn't help feeling a lot of emotion when they thought of the domineering Zhongshan dragon god's lineage. Such a huge momentum woke up the little princess. The fairy was afraid that she would cry, so she hurriedly shook and patted her, but she was very quiet. She changed her hand and continued to suck. Her white eyes looked curiously at the countless gods in front of her. Without blinking, Qi Nan reckoned that Lord Ma should name the little princess. This ceremony was very important and could not be disturbed. He stepped forward and held Qing Yan, who was inexplicably excited, and told the fairy to take him to the seat. He held the jade box by himself. Inside, there are thin sticks made of immortal trees, each of which is engraved with words, just waiting for Emperor Zongshan's choice. After praying in all directions, the emperor suddenly raised his hand and patted the jade box lightly, and saw countless thin sticks of undead trees flying up as if they were alive, forming countless circles of different sizes in the air. After a while, two thin sticks, as if being pulled by an invisible thread, it gently fell into Daijun's palm. He looked down, took the writing brush on the case, dipped it in the water of Tianhe River, and wrote the word Xuanyi neatly in the air. Suddenly, the luminous light shone, and the word Xuanyi slowly floated in midair. Suddenly it turned into thousands of light spots, floating in the night, and it took a long time to dissipate in the wind. Since the way of heaven has shown it, I should follow the will of heaven. Today I will name the little girl, Xuanyi. The next moment, the sound of congratulations came and went. Behind the huge glass screen, the music officials played fairy music, thousands of golden flowers fell like rain, and countless fine wines suddenly appeared on the empty ceremony table, and all the gods raised their glasses to invite them to drink. The aroma of the wine was mellow, and the little Princess Xianyi in the fairy's arms was not used to the smell, so she sneezed, followed by a poof. This exquisite jade doll turned into a dingy little dragon under the eyes of everyone, only a few inches long, swaying head to tail in the female officer's hand, like a loach. The surroundings suddenly fell silent, the three princesses of Tongshan paled, and her voice changed in shock, a little harsh, "Oh! How did you become a loach?" Emperor Zongshan's face was gloomy, and the gods who invited him to drink were silent, pretending not to hear the words of the third princess of Tongshan, and even the music officials behind the screen stopped playing music. The lineage of the dragon who has already taken a human body should not change again, returning to the dragon body, unless the divine power is low, it cannot maintain the human body for a long time. But what is the bloodline of Zhongshan dragon god? How can the little princess have low power? As I said before, I got a human body in 200 years, so what is it now? Under the eyes of everyone, he transformed back into a little dragon, and he still looked like a loach. He grabbed Emperor Zongshan's face and slapped him loudly, resounding through the sky. www.mtlnovel.com. Qinjian, who was sitting quietly, suddenly walked to in front of the embarrassed female fairy. She raised her hand to hold her younger sister into her arms, gently stroked the small bud-like horns on her head with her fingers, and coaxed in a low voice, "Good boy, be obedient, change back quickly." But the little princess, who looked like a loach, yawned in his palm, spit out a bunch of saliva bubbles, curled up into a ball, and fell asleep. On February 2nd, the dragon raised its head, and the 200th birthday party of the little princess on the top of Zhongshan had ended early. When the gods left, it was already raining on the top of Zhongshan. I think the emperor was in a bad mood, and Zhongshan might be frozen in 2 days. No matter how upset Emperor Zhongshan is, this matter still spread throughout the entire god realm at the fastest speed. Even the little immortals on the 3 fairy islands know that Zhongshan dragon god has blown the cowhide. Claiming to be born in 200 years, the little princess turned into a loach at the birthday banquet. The title of Princess Loach has naturally resounded throughout the universe, and the lineage of Zhongshan dragon god, who has the title of the Lord of 10,000 Dragons, has once again been smeared with the few remaining prestige, and even the monsters below dare to laugh openly them. Until thousands of years later, goddess Kuihe, the wife of Emperor Zhongshan, died in the wilderness for some reason. At the same time, the Tongshan clan in the north was suddenly frozen by ice, and all the gods in the clan perished. There are rumors that it was exactly what Emperor Zhongshan did. The destruction of the Tongshan family was so bizarre that the heavenly emperor had asked the emperor to question him, but the result was not satisfactory. No one knows what the 2 gods talked about, only that Emperor Zhongshan returned to Zhongshan safely and continued to be his emperor, but the matter of the Tongshan clan was silently suppressed by the Emperor of Heaven, pretending it never happened. At this point, Zongshan's reputation as the dragon once again shocked the gods, and finally no one dared to mention the joke about Princess Loach again. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, 8,000 years have passed. It was a sunny spring day, and 2 unexpected news broke the peace of the god realm that had lasted for many years. The first one is that in the Huawang's back garden, the whirling peony that was supposed to bloom only once in 30,000 years, this time it only bloomed in less than 10,000 years. The second one, there is a gossip that the Emperor of Heaven intends to match the little princess of the Zhongshan dragon god Zuyan clan and the only son of the Qing Emperor Huaxu clan Fu Kengshenjun. It just so happened that the whirling peonies in Huawang's garden were in bloom. In line with the idea of "I don't want to be too embarrassed to meet for the first time," the Emperor of Heaven fixed the first meeting of the 2 young gods in Huawang's back garden, and saw the gods who came to enjoy the flowers. There are so many, they will not stare at each other. As soon as the news came out, there was an endless stream of gods who came to enjoy the flowers in the past few days, and the threshold of the back garden seemed to be stepped down by a few inches. At that time, Emperor Zongshan's wife, Fairy Kuihe, died in the wilderness. Since then, the gods have sealed Zhongshan and have almost no contact with the gods. Up to now, no one has seen the appearance of the sons and daughters of the gods. As for that little princess, there are rumors like Princess Loach, and she must be just a mediocre little in 9 out of 10. However, no matter how mediocre she was, her background was still exceptionally noble. Now the little princess is only 9,700 years old, and she has just reached the age of marriage, yet she is able to invite the Emperor of Heaven to match her, and the Qing Emperor introduces her only son. Such a posture, the ordinary gods can only admire and admire. However, who is bad for the heavenly emperor to tie the knot? Why is it the god of helping king? The hearts of countless goddesses in the god realm were secretly broken by this. I still remember that god Fu King was only 22,000 years old back then. When the emperor and daughter got married, the banquet was held for 5 days. When the Emperor of Heaven marries a daughter, the gods naturally have to support him. At that time, the dragon girls from all over the world began to sing and dance. The king of Xiang played the flute and played it horizontally. Su Shi, the Emperor of Heaven, was drunk, and suddenly turned his head to look at a young who was sitting alone in the southeast corner, and said with a smile, "Fu Kang, why don't you dance your sword for fun?" The young Shenjun raised his sleeves, his graceful posture was like a crane, and the long sword was held in his hand, flowing like clouds and flowing water. A song of Houyufrost came to an end, and his movements also came to an end. The long sword drew a neat and beautiful line. The young stood proudly, with a slightly sideways face, and the curve of the bridge of the nose and jaw was beautiful and perfect. He raised his hand, handing back the long swords to the dragon girls, the drooping eyelashes were raised, and the eyes were as cold as moonlight. Peerless. A sword dance made Fu King Shenjun famous all over the world, and also made countless goddesses fascinated by him. Now thinking that he is about to fall into the clutches of the little princess of the Zuyan family, it is heartbreaking. 3 quarters later, the wind suddenly picked up, and the layered and turbulent sea of clouds seemed to be torn apart suddenly by a pair of giant hands. The blue 9-headed lion flew against the wind, and landed in the dazzling pear blossom forest in the blink of an eye. In the snow-white sky, the young Shenjun lightly jumped off the lion's back, his wide sleeves swaying, and he was startled. It was the only son of Emperor King Hua, Fu King Shenjun. He came alone, without any retinue or maidservant, and led the 9-headed lion to Hua Wang's courtyard. Up to the gate of the courtyard, Hua Wang's attendants had already greeted him, and took the reins respectfully. "I wonder what arrangements Hua Wang has?" Fu King asked in a low voice. Different from his cold moon-like appearance, his voice was extremely alluring. As soon as he opened his mouth, his low and alluring voice brushed gently over his heart like a soft feather brush, making one half-hearted. The waiters blushed involuntarily, unable to answer his question for a while. All of a sudden, there was another thunderous humming sound from the sea of clouds, and the overlapping clouds were torn apart mercilessly, and a long and resplendent car shuttled forward in the clouds, and the tattoo on it was Zhongshan Dragon God the totem, the auspicious light around the body, and the followers are mighty, no less than 100 people. When the mighty crowd landed in the pear blossom forest, the small flower forest suddenly seemed a little crowded, and the gods had to give way one after another. I saw the 30 followers in front of me carrying small bronze buckets, scooping up water with jade ladles, and splashing it on both sides of the road. 30 female fairies in the middle are holding purple and gold censers, and the green smoke is curling up, and the elegant and cool aroma almost overwhelms the smell of pear blossoms. The next 30 followers laid down a snow-white blanket of fine clouds along the way. This blanket was woven by the weaving girls on the bank of the Tianhe River, and it was decorated with beautiful jade from the Tianhe River. A foot of fine cloud blanket is extremely luxurious, and the little princess actually used it to pave the road, which is too luxurious. The last 30 female celestial beings following behind the long carriage held whisks, feather fans, treasure vases and jade boxes, and 2 attendants even carried huge brocade umbrellas. Although there were many attendants, they were extremely quiet. They walked all the way to the gate of the courtyard with astonishing momentum. Emperors don't have such ostentation. The gods whispered in dissatisfaction. Even if it was the princess of Zhongshan dragon god, she was aggressive and followed hundreds of people when she first appeared. Did she want to show her unattainable status? The car door was opened with a squeak, and the entourage who carried the umbrella immediately opened the brocade umbrella and waited on both sides. The maidservant bent her arm respectfully. www.mtlnovel.com. A slender hand rested on it, with 5 fingernails on it. They were all painted with bright red cowton, and against the bright yellow sleeves of the fairy, the skin looked even more like new snow. The eyes of all the gods were focused on that cat. Can come out, little princess of Zhongshan dragon god, and see what you look like to be so arrogant and luxurious. A slender figure slowly descended from the resplendent car. The little princess was wearing a frost-colored long dress with countless dark golden cloth-eddied dragons densely patterned on it. Her long jet-black hair was decorated with golden rings. Without any ornaments, there is a kind of quiet luxury. Her face was drooping in the shadow of the brocade umbrella, and the cheeks that occasionally leaked were full and tender. Supporting the maidservant, she walked neither fast nor slow, and every step was just right and graceful. When they walked in front of God Fuking, the umbrella-carrying entourage and the maidservant stepped back 3 steps and knelt down to salute. It was the first time that the gods saw the appearance of the little princess of Zhongshan dragon god. The young goddesses were suddenly a little discouraged. The little princess's complexion was extremely fair, which made her eyebrows and eyes darker, and her lips more delicate. Maybe it's because of her noble birth, or maybe it's because she's too ostentatious, but she has an inexplicable aura, like innocent delicacy, but also like reserved nobility, which makes her look like she will never be lost to the gods. What's more, she is so graceful, clean and dust-free. At the age of 9,000 years, the little princess still has a childish fullness on her cheeks. Her expression is very calm, and she can't see any inner emotions. The young Shenjun is just a wooden man with blurred facial features. Zhengzhi bent down to salute, and the elegant and cool fragrance covered the entire Huawangxian island. My concubine is Zhongshan dragon god Zuyan, Xuanyi, and I have met the god of helping king. Her voice was as soft as the cool breeze on a summer night. The 9-headed lion was taken to the riding circle, and the large group of mighty attendants brought by the little princess had also dispersed, sticking to the edge of the fairy island, and silently surrounded the Huawang fairy island. Drum! This move caused a lot of displeasure among the gods, who complained secretly, but were reluctant to leave. Can God Fuking and Princess Zhongshan fall in love with each other? Everyone is very concerned about this matter. Seeing that the gods led the little princess into the inner garden of the Huawang, unless the Huawang invited them, they would never be able to enter, so the gods had to look in hard, stretching their necks like geese. The Flower Emperor's inner garden is full of colorful flowers, and all the flowers are cherished by the Flower Emperor. Where the wind passes by, the light and strong fragrances are delivered one after another, which makes people feel relaxed and happy. The little princess walked very slowly, as if she couldn't walk without the help of the fairy, so the god of helping king had to stop and go, turning back to wait for her from time to time. No one spoke. Shenjun didn't seem even interested in raising the topic, and remained silent all the way like a mute. But for a moment, Xuanyi complained softly from behind, "This road is full of gravel, it is very rough, I am really not used to walking, I hope thou will be considerate, let me rest for a while." Fu King stopped on the hanging corridor beside the Yunqi without saying a word, and when he turned around, he glanced at the path under his feet. It was embedded with extremely smooth tianhe stone, rough. Xuanyi wiped the railing with a handkerchief a dozen times before leaning on it softly, and threw the handkerchief into the cloud pond. Fu King stood beside her, and said in a low voice, "There are many fairy fishes raised in the Yunqi in Huawang's inner garden, it is not appropriate for the princess to do this." Xuanyi raised his head and looked at him quietly, "Thee is right. I am a descendant of Zhongshan Zuyan. How can the little Yunqi place my concubine's handkerchief? It is my concubine's lack of thoughtfulness. The people in this Yunqi immortal fish, today is considered a blessing." Fu King didn't speak any more, but Xuanyi spoke slowly again, "I have been raised in a deep boudoir, and I know very little about the outside world, and my father has only relayed some things about the gods. The gods are young and unrestrained. There was a sword dance at the emperor's daughter's wedding banquet, but it was a pity that the concubine was unable to witness the heroic appearance of the god. However, since both the father and the Qing emperor were interested, the concubine did not dare to see outside, and now there is something I want to say to the god." She spoke slowly and softly, biting the words, and she spoke for a long time. Fu King listened to her with patience, and his voice became a little colder. "The princess has something to say, but it's okay to say it." Xuanyi said lightly, "The Divine Lord is the son of Dongfang Kingdi, and he will inherit the Qing Emperor's position in the future. Dance with knives and guns is what a reckless general did. The Divine Lord will become an emperor in the future, so this is not appropriate." Her expression was always extremely calm, and she turned a blind eye to the growing impatience in the depths of his eyes, and instead said, "I can see the gods today, and I admire him very much in my heart. It is my wish to be married with the gods. Therefore, I still hope that the gods will think twice, and I hope that my husband will be a refined and noble emperor, not a reckless man who wields a knife and sticks." Fu King frowned slightly, and then relaxed again, his tone indifferent. "It's too early for the princess to say anything, so let's rest assured. The whirling peonies in the flower emperor's inner garden have bloomed recently, the princess would like to go and see them together." Xuanyi reluctantly agreed, and continued to walk slowly behind him. It took half an hour to complete the hanging corridor, and it took another half an hour to arrive at the peony court. Seeing that it was the two of them, the flower guard immediately bowed down respectfully and opened the courtyard door, and saw countless peonies in the courtyard blooming enchantingly against the spring breeze, bunches of purple and pink, like clouds spreading brocade, and on the glazed platform in the middle I only planted a peony flower. The flower is no more than the size of a palm, but there are thousands of layers of petals, its color is transparent like frost, and there are countless slender veins on the ice crystal-like petals. The color is like jasper. It is said that the mother-in-law peony blooms only once every 30,000 years. What a beautiful peony! Xuanyi praised, then suddenly raised his arm. The luxurious silk long sleeves slowly slipped down, revealing his white and slender arms, as if he was going to pick this precious peony. The flower guard immediately turned pale with shock, and said anxiously, "Princess, no." Xuanyi wondered, why not? Fu King, who was behind him, suddenly spoke. His voice was as cold as ice. "The whirling peony is the spiritual root of heaven and earth, it blooms only once in 30,000 years, how can the princess destroy it out of selfishness?" Xuanyi's eyes flickered, he seemed a little aggrieved, and said lightly, "But, I like it, it is the blessing of this flower, the spiritual root of heaven and earth, how can it compare with Zhongshan Zuyan?" Fu King finally didn't wait for her to finish speaking slowly, took a few steps back, and bowed his hands. "I still have something to do, I can't stay with the princess for a long time, so I'm leaving." After all, he didn't wait for her to answer, and walked away. Xuanyi didn't move, her arms were still raised, and her slender fingers were a few inches away from touching the petals. The flower guard at the side was frightened and flustered, pleading repeatedly, "I hope the princess will show mercy. This is the most cherished peony of Lord Huawang." After a while, Xuanyi's frightening hand finally slowly retracted. She adjusted her sleeves slowly, and suddenly smiled at the flower attendant who survived the catastrophe. "Whirling peony really deserves its reputation, it's a pity." The words "it's a pity" made the flower guard break out in a cold sweat again. but seeing the little princess calmly started to admire the other peonies in the courtyard, and the who helped king walked away, it seemed to have no effect on her at all. Neither embarrassed nor angry, she walked around the peony yard, admiring every kind of peony, and then slowly walked out of the inner garden. The gods who were guarding the door and peeping scattered like birds and beasts, and continued to play the piano, dance in the pear blossom forest. All eyes were secretly glued to the little princess, hoping to see some clues from her face, but this golden and precious princess was so well bred, her expression was so calm that even a needle would not make waves. The mighty entourage once again lined up in a long line, leaving Huawang Immortal Island with astonishing momentum as when they came, leaving behind a group of chattering gods, excitedly discussing with each other what happened just now. The resplendent car shuttles through the sea of clouds. Xuanyi picks a well-pickled ebony plum from the jade box held by the fairy maid, Yu reading www. As soon as yuyuganshu.com was put into her mouth, the sour and sweet taste made her hum happily. Seeing that she was in a good mood, the maidservant asked cautiously, "Princess, what is your impression of meeting God Fu King today?" Xuanyi concentrated on biting the ebony plum, and after a long time said, "I'm afraid it will be impossible." The maidservant was taken aback, but, this is the Heavenly Emperor's matchmaking. Xuanyi looked at her innocently, "How old are you?" The maidservant didn't understand what she meant, so she had to answer honestly, 23,000 years old. Xuanyi spat out the plum core with the most graceful manner, and said calmly, "You are 23,000 years old and haven't married yet, and I am only 9,700 years old this year, so naturally there is no need to worry." The maidservant was taken aback. "How can the maidservant compare with you, the princess? What's more, madam, the emperor is naturally anxious for you to find your home." Xuanyi didn't answer, just opened the curtains, and let the wind come in and mess up her delicate hair. "It's a bit stuffy in the car," she said suddenly. "Stop the car, I want to go out." The mighty long line of retinues stopped suddenly, and the maidservant tried to persuade the wayward little princess, "Princess, you have a noble status, how can you show your face like those ordinary gods?" Xuanyi didn't wait for her to finish speaking, she had already opened the car door, and the mist instantly enveloped her slender body, and the hurricane blew her luxurious clothes swaying, making her look a bit otherworldly. "I am a descendant of Zhongshan dragon god Candle Yin." She looked at the fidgeting maidservant and said slowly. The maidservant hurriedly responded, "That's exactly the case, so you can't, princess. Have you ever seen Longjie riding in a car?" Xuanyi blinked, and the next moment he was flying away against the wind, and he was invisible in the blink of an eye. When goddess Wangsha drove the moon to the top of the sky, Xuanyi returned to Zhongshan unhurriedly. For Zhongshan, which is shrouded in night, majestic and silent, Xuanyi climbed up the long steps, step by step. The thin frost on the steps glowed a dim blue color under the moonlight, and the trees, flowers and plants on both sides had been frozen in crystal clear ice. Maybe after a while, even this long step will be frozen, Xuanyi thought, when he comes to see his father again, he will have to fly. The ancient Hall of Eternal Life stands at the end of the steps, and only Zuyan, who became the emperor of Zhongshan in the past, can live in it. At this moment, the huge hall door was slightly opened, and the cold wind came out from the gap, messing up the hair that Xuanyi had just arranged. She pressed it with her hand, and the hall door suddenly opened wide, and Emperor Zongshan's voice came out, "Yi, come here." Xuanyi lowered his head slightly, and walked into the hall respectfully. The huge hall of eternal life was shrouded in thick darkness, only a faint candlelight flickered on the ice chair in the middle. Emperor Zhongshan quietly looked at the candle flame floating in front of him, his face looked extremely pale and haggard in the darkness. Xuanyi bowed and saluted, and respectfully said, "Xuanyi has seen his father." Emperor Zhongshan nodded silently, and after a while, he asked in a low voice, "I met God Fukang for the first time today, what do you think of him?" Xuanyi said, my daughter thinks that God Fu King has outstanding appearance and extraordinary bearing, and he really lives up to his reputation. Emperor Zhongshan rarely showed a smile on his haggard face. Oh? You like him? Xuan Yi said indifferently, the emperor doesn't seem to favor his daughter. Emperor Zhongshan was a little surprised. Could it be that he already has his own heart? How could it be? Xuan Yi bowed his head and said, I am your daughter, you naturally feel that everything is good, outsiders may not be like this. Emperor Zhongshan took a deep look at her, her expression was extremely calm, without a single trace of real emotion. He remembered that when A Kui was still there, his son was joking, laughing and messing around all day long, and although his daughter was naturally quiet, her chubby little face was always full of charming smiles. Now there is nothing. For 9,000 years, Xuan Yi never smiled at him, nor cried. In front of him, she never made any mistakes, she was calm and perfect. A trace of embarrassment flashed across Emperor Zongshan's heart, and he forced himself to speak, it's okay, if this one doesn't work, I'll change it. I'm the daughter of Zhongshan Zuyan, and I'm afraid I won't be able to find a good husband-in-law. Father said yes. Xuan Yi replied. The candle light danced a few times, and her face looked very strange in the changing light and shadow. Emperor Zhongshan thought of A Kui's blood-stained face when he died, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably, and the candle flame jumped even more violently. Up! Back then, the enchanting goddess by the Kuihi River had just opened her love, and fell into a fiery love with the young emperor of Zhongshan dragon god's lineage, longing for everlasting devotion and loyalty. But he ruined her, himself, and their children, no matter how much he regretted it, it would not help. He didn't want the same for II. The Protoss have a long and almost eternal time, love and hate, ambiguity and frivolity, pretentiousness and entanglement. Countless Protoss indulge in it to pass the time. Most of the sincere and dedicated hearts are broken here. He once destroyed a heart with his own hands, so this time he must protect Yi well, the daughter of Zhongshan Zuyan's family must not be bullied by others. Yi, the world is very vast, and there are all kinds of gods. There will always be those who will make you happy, and there will always be those who will make you uncomfortable. You are getting older, and you can't stay in Zhongshan forever. I think you should be more knowledgeable, don't be as stubborn as your mother. His throat was bitter, and the candle flame jumped more and more intensely, and finally went out with a chi, and the hall of eternal life fell into complete darkness. Go and rest early. Emperor Zongshan's voice sounded as if he came from a very far away place, I will leave the rest to Qinan. What's next? What's up? Xuan Yi had a bad premonition in his heart. Sure enough, when he came out of the palace gate, he saw the priest Qinan waiting far away in the ice and snow. Seeing her, Qinan's smile was slightly teasing, and he said, Princess met God Fu King for the first time today, how is it going? This question has been asked 3 times. Xuan Yi rolled his eyes, and answered succinctly, Shenjun didn't like me. Qinan just laughed, he was obviously not as perfunctory as Emperor Zhongshan, the princess is still so eccentric. The little princess has been weird since she was a child, and she can hardly hear the words don't from her mouth. She can obey whatever the emperor tells her with a smile, do what she likes to do, and make a mess of what she doesn't like, no one can fault it. Knowing that she was going to meet Lord Fu Kang, she happily agreed to it, but Qinan heard that she had brought 120 followers with her this morning, so she knew it was not good. The emperor is not in a hurry to marry the princess. Qinan looked at her with a smile, and his playfulness became stronger. The emperor is just worried that the princess is too naughty. If he doesn't introduce her earlier, he might not be able to get married in the future. Xuan Yi simply stepped forward to grab his sleeve, raised his head and smiled until his eyes narrowed into crescent moons. I haven't even reached 10,000 years old, and I will consider getting married when I am 200,000 years old. Qinan is the oldest priest on Zhongshan Mountain. After A Niang's accident, his father's temperament changed drastically. Both Shi and Qingyan grew up under the care of Qi Nan. They are much closer to Qi Nan. A 200,000-year-old dragon girl, I'm afraid it will be difficult to marry. Qi Nan still wanted to tease her. Xuanyi rolled his eyes innocently, I really want to marry, and I can marry at 500,000 years old. I don't know who this idea resembles. Qi Nan shook his head helplessly. Qi Nan, is there any news about Qingyan? She looked at him expectantly like a little girl. Mr. Xiaolong has never passed on a single word in the past 300 years www.mtlnovel.com but the princess does not need to worry. Although Emperor Xianming has a weird temper, he treats his disciples very well. Lord Xiaolong will definitely not be a teacher under him. Something went wrong. Qingyan's relationship with Emperor Zhongshan became very bad after the death of Kuihe goddess. It was not until more than 3,000 years ago that Emperor Xianming came to visit and fell in love with him. He probably wanted to resolve the quarrel between their father and son, so he simply accepted him. As a disciple, he took him to Tianbei. However, Lord Xiaolong really had the heart. There was no news for 300 years, really. Qi Nan couldn't help but feel emotional, seeing Xuanyi's heartless and happy look. He frowned slightly, and suddenly said, Princess, Lord Xiaolong learned from you 3,000 years ago. Emperor Xianming, you live a carefree life in Tianbei, do you want to go out like him to broaden your horizons? I thought this little girl must be overjoyed, but she smiled slightly. Qi Nan, you are in collusion with your father, and why are you arranging trouble for me? Qi Nan was stunned. Princess, don't you want to see what's outside of Zhongshan? Besides, this is the only way for every young Protoss. When you reach 50,000 years old, you can't just idle around all day long. You must have a priesthood in the god realm. That's fine, otherwise it's a crime of exile. Xuanyi yawned. It was rare for her to take a long trip, she was sleepy. I'm going to bed. She rubbed her eyes and walked down the steps. Qi Nan, if you have any news about Qingyan, you must tell me immediately. Qi Nan really couldn't do anything with her freewheeling attitude, and said anxiously, Princess. It's a serious matter to pay homage to Mr. You have to choose a Mr. I brought all the brochures. Xuanyi only waved his hand, and said calmly, You make arrangements, I will do whatever I want. You make arrangements, I do whatever I want. The last time I told her about God Lord Fuekeng, she said the same thing. Qi Nan had a headache, he was afraid that he would never understand what was in this little princess's head. Qi Nan opened the food box and glanced inside. Inside the food box made of 3 mulberry trees, there are small plum blossom-shaped grids separated by gold flakes. In each grid, there are 2 exquisite refreshments, among which are the princess's favorite peach blossom mincemeat cake and agate white jade. Cake is different. Make a pot of Huiguang Fijing tea. He ordered the fairy next to him. The little princess is very strict about tea tasting, and she is very particular about what kind of tea goes with which tea. Since he is going to go out with her today, he must make her happy first. When stepping into the cloud environment of Zifu, Qi Nan suddenly felt a little emotional. The purple mansion in front of him is full of emperor mulberries, and the dark green and light red are intertwined everywhere, which is completely different from the scene he saw 9,000 years ago. At that time, the Zi mansion was buried under the 10,000 feet of ice, and it was falling into the darkness where you can't see your fingers. As soon as I got close to the princess's Yuanzhan Hall, I felt a chill hit my face. Everywhere in the Zifu was full of vitality, only the vicinity of the Yuanzhan Hall was covered with ice and snow. In front of the hall, there are countless things piled up with snow, some are portraits, some are flowers and plants, and more are all kinds of strange houses. Dressed in a fiery red fox fur cloak, the little princess is sitting on a crystal stool, concentrating on kneading the white snow in her hand into a snow peony. This familiar scene reminded Qi Nan that thousands of years ago, he broke through the ice in the dark purple mansion, looking for the little princess everywhere, and finally saw her in front of the Yuanzhan palace. At that time, she was pinching flowers, and there is only one snowman in front of the hall, lifelike. It is exactly the appearance of the lady who fell to the ground when she died. She squeezed the ice flowers and threw them gently on the snowman, covering the whole snowman in a short while. He was surprised and sad at the same time, so he asked her softly, "What is the princess doing?" The little princess, who was only 1,500 years old at the time, was very calm. "I gave my mother some flowers to cover the blood on her body." These memories are not very good, Qi Nan secretly sighed in his heart. "Princess!" he called her, holding up the food box in his hand, "Tea is here." The princess, who was concentrating on pinching the snow peony, suddenly spoke, with a three-pointed laziness and a three-pointed coquettish, "Qi Nan, you must have come to me for some trouble, so I won't eat this tea." Qi Nan smiled and opened the food box. "You really don't want to eat?" Fengyue turned his head, saw peach blossom mincemeat cake and agate white jade cake, and immediately smiled happily. "Qi Nan, you are so kind. What is tea?" "Huiguang Fijing tea." Qi Nan gently placed the sapphire teapot on the crystal table. Fengyue was overjoyed, and picked out the box for a while, first picked up an agate white jade cake, took a small bite, and over there, Qi Nan had already poured a cup of tea for her. With the elegant aroma of Huiguang Fijing tea, she finished half a box of refreshments in one go, then let out a sigh of satisfaction, picked up the unfinished peonies by the table, and continued to pinch. After a while, she suddenly raised her hand with a smile, and an ice crystal-like whirling peony was in full bloom in her palm, with dense jasper-like veins on the translucent petals, extremely beautiful. "Qi Nan, can you wear this whirling peony on your lapel?" "No, she won't admit it." After eating and drinking, Qi Nan smiled bitterly. "What kind of flowers do I wear for a grey-haired old man?" Fengyue leaned over, gently tied the snow peony on his lapel, and said with a smile, "You are not old, look, it compliments you a lot." Qi Nan touched Shui peony, the cold touch made his heart soften slightly, and his voice became gentle. "Princess, I have made an appointment with Emperor Baizi today, and it's time to start." Fengyue showed a bewildered expression. "Who is Emperor Baizi?" She is used to pretending to be stupid, so Qi Nan had no choice but to explain again. "Last time I told the princess about worshipping Mr. Emperor Baizi is one of the 30 chiefs in the pantheon, and the princess will definitely benefit from asking him to be Mrs. quite a few. Qi Nan, can you just teach me?" Qi Nan shook his head. "Is it true that everyone in the god realm can be a gentleman? Only the gods who have a seat in the pantheon can take on this important task. When the princess reaches 50,000 years old, if there is no letter from the gentleman in the pantheon, she will be. It is a great crime to be exiled to the mortal world. Even the sons and daughters of emperors cannot be spared. This is the death rule of the god realm. Every newcomer to the god clan who is less than 50,000 years old must worship a gentleman in the pantheon, and practice the 5 elements of yin and yang, the general principles of priesthood, luck and doom, and so on. So that they can obtain priesthood and perform their own duties, so that they will not idle around looking for flowers and visiting willows, causing the gods to fall." Fengyue said lightly, "I'm still far from 50,000 years old." Knowing that it would not work to reason softly with her, Qi Nan simply smiled and said, "The princess naturally knows the reason, so why bother to ask?" She nestled in the purple mansion all day long, never leaving the gate, and finally found the Emperor of Heaven to introduce him to God Fu Kang, and then told her to deliberately mess things up. What the Emperor is most afraid of is that the princess is raised in a deep boudoir and doesn't know the world. Fengyue blinked, "But, I'm not feeling well today." Qi Nan jokingly shook his head again and again. "No matter what you say, you are a princess. If you don't say what you say, you must at least do what you say. Last time I mentioned this to the princess, what did the princess say? Let us arrange. The princess is like this now, is it casual? Besides, the princess is really not feeling well?" I didn't notice it when I was having tea just now. Fengyue finally put down the snowflakes in his hand, got up and helped Fuhu hide the drape, and sighed, "Let's go, I'll go." The pantheon is located in the Zhongtian Wanshan mountain. Because it is not far from the Tiangong, and all the gods are checked and verified here, the gods are bustling, which is extremely lively. After the long car landed, Nan got out of the car in no hurry, first took out a jade box from his sleeve, and when he opened it, he saw that it was covered with a brocade mat woven with Xiaoguang silk and Tianhe jade, and on the mat was a palm-sized pitch-black scale, deep and dull, with complicated lines. Fengyue was a little stunned. Is this the scale of my father? The scales of the dragon god of Zhongshan are fearless of the 5 elements, yin and yang, and the sharp weapons of magic weapons. They are called the most precious treasures. They were given to the old man by Zedahun just to beg him to accept him as a disciple? Nan smiled. With the power of Emperor Baizi, he is naturally worthy of the dragon scales of the Zuyan clan. It is said that this Emperor Baizi is the oldest among the gods who are still serving in the god realm. www.mtlnovel.com. He has pioneered the way of nature and is proficient in the principles of all things in the world. There are 33,333 people in the pantheon. The 13 temples are protected by his great supernatural power. There are as many Protoss who want to be his disciples as Crucian carp crossing the river, but he is extremely strict in selecting disciples, and often likes to ask some very tricky and weird questions to test admirers, so there are rumors that 100,000 Protoss. It is also difficult to find a disciple of Emperor Baizi. Emperor Baizi originally heard that the princess was still young, so he declined to meet her. If the emperor hadn't persuaded him and sent him a generous gift, I'm afraid it would be hard to get this side. However, a meeting is a meeting. Whether this can be done or not is up to you. It depends on whether the princess is favored by his discerning eyes. The princess should not act recklessly, wasting the emperor's dragon scales. Nan knew her viciousness best, so he couldn't help but speak earnestly. Fengyue nodded, while pushing the car door, who knew that the door opened, and the auspicious light filled the sky outside rushed towards their faces, almost blinding their eyes. I saw countless long cars parked in front of Emperor Baizi's Mingxing Hall, and the young gods were all anxiously guarding the door, waiting for the emperor to give him a chance to test. Nan couldn't help feeling, there are so many Protoss looking forward to worshipping under Emperor Baizi. He helped the princess out of the long carriage, and the gods guarding the gate of the palace turned their heads one after another, and countless pairs of eyes were fixed on Fengyue. The situation looked terrible. Fengyue adjusted the fiery red fox fur drape all over his body, lowered his head and said lightly, "Why are they all looking at me?" Nan smiled wryly, "It's not the princess's own good deed. The princess is already notorious for putting on such a big show in the Flower Queen's garden that day, and making the god of helping king run away in anger." "Oh, like this?" Fengyue nodded knowingly, and walked forward calmly, without looking sideways. Perhaps the princess of their family is not as weak as the emperor thought. Nan thought to himself as he followed her. When Emperor Zhongshan was young, he had a gentle and affectionate personality. His wife was even more elegant and introverted, but the princess was nothing like them. I really don't know how this attitude of going its own way and being defiant to no one comes from. If she keeps like this, she might not be able to marry at the age of 500,000. Thinking of this, Nan couldn't help but start hating to marry 500,000 years in advance. How wonderful God Fu King is! Their identities match each other, and their ages are not much different. The most important thing is that he doesn't have those messy affair rumors, which is very rare among the young Protoss. The princess actually drove him away in anger. Nan felt that one day he would be angered to death by her too. The gods not far away suddenly made a low noise, and Nan was full of thoughts, so he glanced casually, but saw a handsome white clothed on the opposite side leading 9 green lions across the crowd towards the Mingxing temple. Not the god of helping king. Which one? Could it be that he also came to worship Emperor Baizi as a gentleman? There are such coincidences in the world. He panicked for no reason, raised his hand to catch Xian Yi, and warned her to be careful in her words and deeds, but he found nothing, and turned his head to see that his little princess was standing far away, not planning to say hello to God Fu King at all. Qi Nan was in a hurry. He had already met once, but he actually pretended not to know each other face to face, and the other protoss somehow laughed at Zuyan's lack of etiquette. Seeing God Fu King getting closer, Qi Nan had no choice but to step forward and bowed to salute. God Fu King, our princess is being polite. Fu Kang's cold gaze passed over him, and landed on Xian Yi behind him. He looked away after only one glance, nodded slightly, and said calmly, Princess Dragon is being polite. What does Dragon Princess mean? He can't even remember the name of the princess? Fu King led the nine-headed lion, obviously not intending to stay. He walked around her neatly and was about to go to the back, when he suddenly saw the whirling peony on Qi Nan's lapel. He stopped in his steps. You still picked the posseing peony? Fu Kang's charming voice became extremely low, implying some kind of dangerous storm. He turned around, his eyes sinking like deep water, fixedly looking at Xian Yi. Qi Nan subconsciously touched the snow peony on the front of his shirt, and without caring about the meaning of Fu King Shenjun's question, he hurriedly said, Fu King Shenjun, this is just. A snow-white slender hand stood in front of him, and also blocked his words. Xian Yi calmly looked at Fu King Shenjun's indifferent eyes, and her slow and soft tone sounded like adding fuel to the fire instead of easing the atmosphere. A flower, I like it, pick it up and pick it up, why is this so angry? Fu King looked at her expressionlessly, unable to see any joy or anger, and slowly said word by word, the mother-in-law peony is the spiritual root of heaven and earth, it blooms once every 30,000 years, and the Emperor of Flowers loves her extremely, watering and fertilizing it every day. Do it yourself. Xian Yi smiled slightly, it is such a rare and precious peony that can be worthy of the Zuyan family. Fu King looked at her for a while, then suddenly let go of the nine-headed lion's rein, and walked towards her step by step. Qi Nan was shocked. No matter what this divine ruler wanted to do, such a move was considered a provocation. If there was a conflict due to impulse, it would not be a good thing for Emperor Qing and Emperor Zhongshan. He suddenly raised his hand, took off the whirling peony on the front of his clothes, and threw it on the ground involuntarily, but saw that the crystal-clear peony was broken into several petals silently, with spots of white snow smudged, which was actually made of snow. Qi Nan laughed and said, God Fu King, this is just a joke made by the princess. The whirling peony is so precious, how can the princess pick it up so easily? She is young and can't speak, and I hope the will tolerate it, don't bother with her. Fu King Shenjun frowned, stared at the crushed snow peony on the ground for a long time, then raised her eyes to Xian Yi. She slowly stroked the pattern on the cuff, and asked, the Shenjun came over aggressively just now, because he wanted to do something to me, is it? He didn't seem to hear it, he just cupped his hands towards Qi Nan, and said calmly, the Zuyan family is well deserved. Xian Yi's soft voice sounded again, the Huasu family also opened my eyes. At this moment, Qi Nan has the heart to dig into the ground. What other gods say is not a compliment, it is a naked sarcasm. The princess is always so headstrong, who is he busy for a long time? Fu King still didn't seem to hear, turned around and led the nine-headed lion, found another open space, and waited for the door of Ming Xing Hall to open. Xian Yi retreated a few steps gracefully, and said leisurely, it seems that Lord Fu King also came to worship Emperor Baizi as his husband. I don't want to be colleagues with such reckless and arrogant people. Qi Nan, let's go. Qi Nan was dumbfounded immediately, he could never have imagined that the little princess would come up with this move. Go back without even seeing Emperor Baizi's face. On the way here, he kept his heart in his throat, afraid that she would come up with some tricks, and now she really had a trick, and the frightening thing was that he couldn't think of any way to redeem it. The face of God Fu King on the opposite side was ashen. Qi Nan had never seen such a cold with such an ugly face since he knew him. His hair had already turned grey, and he wanted to apologize, but how could he say it? Seeing that the princess was about to get her wish and board the car back to Zhongshan, Qi Nanji's hair turned grey again, and he couldn't help calling out, "Princess!" The door of the Mingxing Palace, which had been closed all this time, was suddenly opened, and a soft but slender voice sounded with a smile, "Hee, since you are here, why do you have to leave? I have been looking forward to seeing the dragon scales, and I ask the princess to fulfill this long-cherished wish. Don't rush to leave." The gods standing around watching the excitement were shocked. It was the voice of Emperor Baizi. Did Daijun hide behind the door to watch the excitement? Xuanyi had no choice but to go back, took the jade box from the smiling Qi Nan, and said calmly, "The younger generation should obey." After a while, I saw Shi Shiran walking out of the hall of Ming seeing two little fairy boys with pink makeup and jade carvings, and said in unison, "Please enter the hall www.mtlnovel.com. The emperor is waiting for you in the hall." The gods who had been waiting for a long time stepped into the gate of the palace full of hope. After a long time, no one came out of it at all. Xuanyi couldn't help but wondered, "Didn't you say that the test of Emperor Baizi is very strict? All the gods have passed." Qi Nan didn't know what to do, he just said, "Princess, don't worry too much, don't think too much." Xuanyi bowed his head and thought for a while, then simply stepped into the palace gate holding the jade box. Qi Nan seemed to say something behind her, but she didn't have time to hear it clearly. The light and shadow in front of her eyes suddenly changed rapidly, but in the blink of an eye, she went directly into a not-so-big study room from the palace door. There are countless bookshelves densely packed in the study room, and countless books are placed on them, but they are numerous but not messy, and spotless. In front of the bookshelves, there is an old man with white beard who is reading bamboo scrolls carefully. Sitting under the vase in the west corner is a young god, dressed in luxurious clothes, who is concentrating on reading a book. Under the moon window, there is a desk made of agar wood from the West Sea, and another old man is sitting in front of the window, painting with a brush. Beside her was a beautiful goddess in a white shirt. She rolled up her silk sleeves and slowly grinned the ink. The ink stick made a soft and slight friction sound in the ink's tone. Green smoke curled up from the copper incense burner by the table, and the cold fragrance overflowed. A little fairy boy with pink makeup and jade carvings was using a copper pick to disperse the snow-white incense ash. Among the five gods, who is Emperor Baizi? Xuanyi scanned the study for a week, and suddenly understood, is this a test for her? As long as she randomly chooses the wrong one, it means that she will not pass the test, and it also means that she can return to Zhongshan happily. Was she going to make the wrong choice on purpose? So annoying. Holding the jade box, her eyes once again swept across the five gods in the study one by one, then slowly walked towards the little fairy boy who was pulling the incense ashes, bowed respectfully, and said, "Junior Zhuyin Xuanyi, pay homage to Emperor Baizi." Little fairy Tong stopped moving the incense ash, let out a surprised laugh, and looked up at her. His eyes are very clear and soft, as if there is an entire endless ocean inside. "How do you know that I am Emperor Baizi?" He couldn't believe it. Xuanyi thought for a while, "I guess." "Guess," Emperor Baizi couldn't help laughing, what a strange child, he didn't know whether she was smart or stupid. "I seldom show up, even your father has never seen me, let alone you? Can you guess right, don't you have great luck?" As he spoke, he tapped lightly on the incense burner with a copper pick, and the other four gods in the study instantly turned into four streams of green smoke, which curled up and scattered. Xuanyi respectfully handed over the jade box, "Congratulations to the emperor's long-cherished wish." Emperor Baizi laughed again, he was not polite, he took the jade box generously and opened it, the dragon scales inside the box touched his divine power, and there was a faint sound of dragon chant. He couldn't help admiring, his face was filled with the joy of receiving the treasure, and he looked far from the highly respected appearance in the impression of the gods. "Good, good, good." He said 3 good words in a row, looked up at Xianyi with burning eyes, and said with a smile, "You are very good, and the dragon scale is also very good, and it is very good that my long-cherished wish is fulfilled. What's wrong with you being a disciple? It sounds like he is quite reluctant to do this as a gentleman. It just so happens that she is not particularly willing as a disciple. I believe that the master and apprentice will be able to get along easily and happily in the future." Disciple Xianyi pays homage to master. She borrowed the to get off the donkey, and this salutation was quick and beautiful. Emperor Baizi let out a hum, closed the jade box reluctantly, raised his eyes to look at the sky, and said, "It's almost the end of the day, let's call it a day." He clapped his hands lightly, and the whole study room suddenly collapsed like snow. The light and shadow in front of his eyes turned sharply, and in the blink of an eye, Xianyi realized that he was already in the Mingxing Palace, the immature Bai Zedahun who was as immature as a fairy boy. Ji Yi smiled and sat on the emperor's chair, and beside him stood respectfully 2 young protoss, a man and a woman, smiling and looking at, well, not at her, but at the person next to her. God, God of helping king! Hey, he actually passed the test. Xianyi twitched the corner of his mouth in displeasure. Emperor Baizi said with a smile, "In the past thousands of years, you may not receive 1 disciple. Unexpectedly, you have received 2 disciples today. No wonder the blue bird blew 3 times on the branch this morning, but it was good luck. Tai Yao, Zhixi, take a look, how about a younger brother and a younger sister?" The steady Taiyao god on his left said softly, "I have seen the words and deeds of junior brother Fuekeng and junior sister Xuanyi just now. Junior brother Fuekeng is alert and calm, and junior sister Xuanyi is not bad. I think the 2 of them were accepted by Mr. Your seat is very suitable." He called him junior brother and junior sister, obviously he had accepted 2 new disciples. Unexpectedly, Fuekeng suddenly took a step sideways, cupped his hands in salute, and said in a low voice, "Thanks to the emperor's favor, this junior is ashamed. But I'm afraid that this junior won't be able to worship under the emperor's seat, so I hope you will forgive me." His tone was respectful and indifferent. After another salute, he turned around and was about to leave. Emperor Baizi wondered, "You have passed the test but you have to leave? I heard that you and Guting have had a very good relationship since childhood. As a disciple of this seat, do you know that he always recommends you in front of this seat? Are you here today? I'm afraid it's also for the sake of his love, so I leave as soon as I say so, but what should I do?" Fuekeng remained silent. The goddess standing on the right side of Emperor Baizi suddenly stepped forward, bowed and said, "Sir, this disciple also has some opinions." "Zhixi, tell me." Goddess Zhixi turned around in response. Her movements were light and airy, her appearance was bright, her temperament was elegant, and she was forgetful of the commonplace. Her eyes as clear as water glanced at Xianyi before she said, "Sir, this disciple thinks that your test of Princess Xianyi is too childish. This disciple is stupid and can't believe it. What's more, this disciple pays homage to Princess Xianyi as a gentleman. There are also differences in the next matter." She was very courteous, turned around and bowed to Xianyi first, and then said, "I have something to say, so I ask the princess not to take offense. I also saw the conflict between the princess and junior brother Fuekeng in front of the palace gate earlier. However, there was a reason for the incident. A few days ago, in the garden of the Empress Hua, the princess first suppressed the of Fuekeng with her momentum, and then slandered him with words, causing the to leave. This was the beginning of the dispute. Did the princess forget it? Sir, choosing disciples is more important with her talent, bearing, and character. The princess speaks sharply, never letting others down. I don't think the princess is suitable to be worshipped under the seat of Mr. Xianyi's black and white eyes stared at her face for a moment, then suddenly asked, "Excuse me, who are you?" A trace of embarrassment flashed across the bright face of Goddess Zhixi, and she quickly replied, "I am from the Xiong family in Xianyuan, Zhongtian." My name is Zhixi. I worshipped Mr. Xiang as a disciple 9,000 years ago. Xuanyi smiled kindly, and said softly, "Thank you, senior sisters Zhixi, for your teaching. Xuanyi will definitely keep it in mind." Goddess Zhixi frowned when she called senior sister. "I haven't admitted that you are a junior sister. I said that your words are sharp and you don't let others, but am I wrong?" Xuanyi said, "Senior sister's witty words are endless, and what she said makes sense, but I am speechless." Goddess Zhixi's face darkened, and she turned to look at Emperor Baizi. "Mr. Cai's test of the princess just now, my disciple really disagrees. When I asked about it, I couldn't tell why. I just said it was a guess. Comparing with junior brother Fu Kang's sword cutting the world, it's like child's play. Being with her, the disciple feels uneasy. How can you convince the crowd by accepting her like this?" Emperor Baizi always had a smile on his immature face, looking at her for a while, and Xuanyi for a while. Most likely he was just watching the excitement. The Lord Taiyao next to him couldn't bear to watch, and couldn't help coughing lightly. "Sir, what junior sisters Zhixi said may also make sense, sir. Should you think about this matter carefully?" Emperor Baizi pays attention to benevolence, elegance, and degree, and most of his disciples are benevolent, magnanimous, and gentle. This princess who does not know the depth is indeed a bit out of place, not to mention that if Fu King is lost for her, I am afraid that Gu Ting will also die. Will be very unhappy. Emperor Baizi frowned, "But I have accepted the great gift from Emperor Zhongshan, and I am absolutely reluctant to return it. What should I do?" "Xuanyi, tell your brothers and sisters how you guessed this seat, so that I can keep this dragon scale. Here we go again. This is almost a rambunctious style." After all, he just couldn't bear to bear the dragon scales of the Zuyan clan. Goddess Zhixi has always been upright. She folded her arms and said in a low voice, "Sir, I have always taught us that there is something to do and not to do. Doesn't the master disregard the rules because of a treasure? Wouldn't it chill the hearts of the disciples? This is too serious." Tai Yao tugged her sleeve quietly. Zhixi just ignored it. Xuanyi laughed suddenly, and said with dignity, "When I entered the study, only the master didn't look at me. The other four gods were transformed by the master's supernatural powers, and naturally reflected the master's heart, which is beyond the control of the master. Yes. I hold the jade box in my hand, which is the treasure that my husband is looking forward to. Even if he doesn't look at me, he can't help but want to take a look, so I saw through it." Unexpectedly, she can really say that she is ugly and clever. Even Emperor Baizi himself was surprised for a moment. "Really? Another reason, sir, would you like to hear it?" "Continue to talk." www.mtlnovel.com. Xuanyi said lightly, "I see that Mr. moved those incense ashes back and forth, but the decent incense did not change. I guess Mr. will not change it, so I can only use copper for nothing." The dial dialed the incense ash. Emperor Baizi laughed loudly, but after laughing, he looked at her for a long time, and he remembered someone, and said with emotion, "This kind of cleverness and arrogance that makes people love to hate, is very similar." He got up, shook his sleeves, and called out, "Tai Yao, record the names of the two newly promoted juniors, and send them to Wenhua Palace tomorrow." He didn't wait for Fu King to object at all, and forcibly settled the matter. Tai Yao, who was at the side, immediately obediently agreed, and quietly smiled at Fu King comfortingly. "Fu King, Xuanyi, come back to the Mingxing Palace in Chenchi 3 days later, and then as colleagues, we must coexist honestly and kindly. Let's all go." The disciples saluted and retreated one after another, and Emperor Baizi suddenly called Xuanyi to stop. "Wait a minute." Xuanyi looked at him innocently. Was he going to give her another warning? Emperor Baizi waited for the hall of Mingxing to be completely empty. Fang whispered, "You, with this temper." Having said this, he stopped, and thought of something. His face was full of emotion. "Your temperament looks more like..." "Forget it, Xianyi, I have a few words for you. Xianyi bowed and saluted, disciple, listen attentively. You are thoughtful, intelligent, arrogant, and arbitrary. The first two are advantages, but the latter two are disadvantages. There is one omission at the end of 100 secrets, so that someone with a heart can catch a trace of your negligence, and it will be for you. Fatal blow. Xianyi rolled his eyes. Mr. S words are very mysterious, and this disciple doesn't quite understand. Emperor Baizi sighed while smiling. He is also a little guy who is used to pretending to be stupid. Just remember it, go. The news that the princess was successfully accepted by Emperor Baizi as his disciple made Qinan so happy that his beard almost flew into the sky, and he laughed from ear to ear all the way. Xianyi leaned against the car window, continued to pinch the flowers with Baixu, and muttered with his mouth pouted, "You have also got your wish, you have suffered me, and you will have to face that cold-faced Fukang every day from now on." Qinan hardened his face, and said angrily, "The Lord Fukang was offended by the princess herself. The princess has no grievances with him, but she uses him to excuse herself. It's no wonder he isn't angry when he sees you." Xianyi's mouth pouted again, "But I'm only over 9,000 years old, how can I get married so early?" Qinan glared at her, "Princess, don't you think that if you don't put on those hateful gestures, Lord Fukang will fall in love with you at first sight?" Xianyi tilted his head and thought for a while, then nodded, "Yes. How did the emperor and his wife give birth to such an arrogant girl?" Qinan laughed back angrily, becoming more and more sure that he would be off by her one day. "Princess is worrying too much." It took him a long time to choke out a sentence. As the saying goes, it is better to break up an enemy than to end it, not to mention that the princess and God Fukang will be colleagues in the future. Please be friendly to your colleagues and treat talents sincerely. Xianyi used his nails to carve out the shape of the petals, and said lightly, "I hate that Fukang." He believed that Lord Fukang should hate her even more. Qinan had a headache, and his good mood had all turned into all kinds of troubles that had re-emerged. He felt that he should say something more, but he didn't know what else to say. The little princess on the opposite side thought of something again, swept away the haze just now, and showed a naive and smug smile on her face. "I have to write to Qinjian." She was so happy that her eyes lit up. "I will definitely surprise Emperor Baizi by making him my husband." Qinan has long been used to her changeable emotions, so he remains indifferent. He has been a priest for more than 100,000 years, and he has seen countless gods, passionate and romantic like Emperor Zhongshan, aloof and eccentric like Emperor Xianming, extraordinary and refined like Goddess Wangshu. At least they always have rules to follow, but he has not failed to figure out the style of the little princess. Often when he thinks things won't get worse, she can open his eyes. Often when he thinks that he has reached a dead end, she can turn back and forth to continue the road. Sometimes he really felt that it might be the most worry-free thing to keep her locked up in Zhongshan for the rest of her life. As soon as he returned to Zhongshan, the first thing the worried Qinan did was to go to the Hall of Eternal Life to find Emperor Zhongshan. Knowing that Xianyi had passed the test of Emperor Baizi, even Emperor Zhongshan felt astonished. Yi really worshipped under the seat of Emperor Baizi. Earlier, he and Qinan had selected many gentlemen for Xianyi. Originally they had made a plan to choose this one or that one. Although Emperor Baizi was the first choice, the possibility of Xianyi becoming his disciple was very slim. He didn't expect much, and he never expected that he would succeed at once. Qinan smiled wryly. The princess is always smart, and Emperor Baizi has discerning eyes, so he will naturally choose her. The emperor. His subordinates have other important matters to worry about. He talked about all the conflicts between Xianyi and Fukang, and finally said worriedly, "This time the princess has completely formed a grudge with the god Fukang, and they have worshipped Emperor Baizi as their husband together. It is hard to guarantee that it will not continue to deepen. Bad luck, this is a waste of the painstaking efforts of the emperor and the emperor, and if things go on like this, it will not benefit the princess's reputation, not to mention, it will also affect the relationship between the Qing Emperor and the Emperor. Unexpectedly, Emperor Zhongshan burst out laughing after hearing this. Since his wife died, he has never laughed like this again. Qi Nan couldn't help being stunned. I'm always afraid that she's too weak, and I never thought my daughter would have such abilities. Dai Jun's withered face glowed with surprise, and the candles in his palm suddenly lit up countless times. Okay. They are descendants of my Zhuyan clan. After Akui died, his heart was ashamed. He didn't care about foreign affairs, and he neglected to take care of his children. Qinjian hated him, so he left Zhongshan far away. Xuanyi was still young and had never left home. He was very worried about his daughter and wanted to pave all the roads for her so that she could walk safely. If it wasn't for Qi Nan, he still didn't know that Xuanyi was not the taciturn and obedient little girl in his impression. The joy and excitement made Emperor Zongshan's back straighten countless times. He remembered that when he was young, Emperor Zhongshan of the previous generation was also his father, and he was always dissatisfied with him. The most common sentence he said was, "You don't look like a descendant of the Zhuyan family at all." Unparalleled self-confidence, ice snow-clear intelligence, and incomparable arrogance, he doesn't have any of these traits. Instead, he is shy and affectionate, which has attracted countless sighs from his father. But if my father sees Qinjian and Xuanyi, he will never sigh. They are the real descendants of the Zhuyan clan, and he gave birth to a pair of good sons and daughters despite his mediocre life. Qi Nan, you don't have to worry too much. Zhuyan has never been afraid, just let Xuanyi do what she likes. Qi Nan didn't expect the emperor to say the same thing. He couldn't understand, but he couldn't persuade him anymore, so he had no choice but to say, "If you let it go, isn't the emperor afraid that the princess will not be able to marry when she is 500,000 years old?" Emperor Zhongshan shook his head with a smile. "I will talk about the future, as long as Xuanyi will not be bullied. Even if I don't marry for life, what's the problem?" Qi Nan had nothing to say, so he bowed his hands and bowed to leave. The emperor suddenly called him again. "Wait a minute, Qi Nan, let me see how many disciples Emperor Baizi has under his seat." He didn't think about it last time, he just took a cursory look. This time he looked through the roster carefully, only to realize that Emperor Baizi had only accepted 12 disciples in the past 20,000 years. www.mtlnovel.com. Now with the addition of Fu King and Xuanyi, that's 14. Among them, the eldest disciple is the 9th son of Emperor Tian, the 6th disciple is the 3rd son of Hua Wang, the 9th disciple is the princess of Tuxiangshan Snake Emperor, and the 11th disciple is the little princess of Qidi. Looking all the way, his disciples, almost all of them, are famous and expensive. Emperor Zongshan's eyes suddenly stopped on the name of the 12th disciple, and his brows were frowned. Qing Yang clan? Is it from the line of Jushan Phoenix? He hadn't noticed before that the Protoss with the lineage of the Nine Heavens Phoenix also worshipped under the seat of Emperor Baizi. Qi Nan pondered and said, "I have seen it before, and I was also worried, but firstly, the quarrel between the Zhuyan family and the Qing Yang family was caused by the emperor of the previous generation. Why did the two emperors clash at that time, and Lianhai has been closed as a forbidden area to this day? Nothing wrong with that." Emperor Zhongshan thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's right, let's leave him alone for the time being. It's not my Zhuyan clan's style to be shy and scrupled. Are you afraid that they won't succeed?" It had been a long time since he had exhausted his mind like this, and the emotionally fluctuating laughter just now seemed to make him tired. The candle in his palm flickered and gradually dimmed. Qi Nan secretly sighed in his heart. The emperor froze the Tongshan clan in his rage back then, consumed too much divine power, and has not been able to fully recover until today. He put away the roster and said in a low voice, "Emperor, please calm down, the subordinates will leave first." Emperor Zhongshan slowly closed his eyes, and said lightly, "Go ahead. If there is any news from Qinjian, please tell me." Qi Nan bowed back to the gate of the palace, and took another look inside. The dense darkness had quietly swallowed the dim candle light. The weather was gloomy, and the drizzle wet the mocking wind beast's nose on the corner of Mingxing Hall, and it gradually turned into a crystal droplet and fell down. Xuanyi waited in front of Mingxing Hall, staring at the mocking wind beast in a daze. Qi Nan sent her over early in the morning, but it turned out that the gate of the palace hadn't been opened yet, so she was bored waiting. The Hall of Mingxing is located in the southwest of the Hall of the Pantheon, and it is only 2 cloud heads away from the department responsible for the transfer and verification of the priesthood. Xuanyi used his sleeves to block the dazzling auspicious light above. Every Zhongshan Zuyan family doesn't like things that are too bright. How superior do those protoss who like to maximize their own auspicious light feel superior? It's so bright, I might as well be the sun. Just as the impact of Hao Yi's shooting of the sun has not yet passed, the Emperor of Heaven must be very happy to have the gods volunteer. Suddenly there was a low roar of lions behind her. She turned her head, and saw God Fu King walking slowly leading 9 green lions. Every tiny raindrop is quietly separated 3 inches above his head. In the drizzle, he looks like he is walking in mist and light clouds. His white clothes are better than snow, and his clean steps are different from the lofty training of any other gods. It was probably found that she was standing in front of the hall without raising her head, but stopped far away by the door of the hall, leaning on the 9 green lions, quietly closing her eyes and resting her mind. Xuanyi thought of Qi Nan's earnest advice before leaving. He was always worried about her bad reputation, that she would not be able to get along with her colleagues in a friendly way, and even more afraid that she would be bullied by her colleagues because of her willfulness. Qi Nan has always been most worried about her, and only he would babble about such trivial things about her. She felt that she couldn't keep disturbing him all the time. She decided to be friendly, while the atmosphere was not bad now. Senior brother Fu King, please be polite. Xuanyi gracefully bowed to the young on the opposite side. Now that they are colleagues, they have to call him senior brother instead. There was silence on the other side. Fu King didn't seem to hear, he didn't even move his eyebrows. Senior brother Fu King. She raised her voice slightly. He remained motionless, as if she didn't exist at all. Xuanyi blinked his eyes. Senior brother Fu King, are you deaf? His long eyelashes trembled slightly, and then raised. His beautiful and indifferent eyes just didn't look at her, his thin lips were slightly parted, and his charming voice became very low because of suppressed disgust. Go away! Go away? Xuanyi smiled slightly, but instead took a step forward. The 9 green lions behind him immediately let out a threatening growl. 9 pairs of eyes stared straight at her, as if they were going to rush up and bite her at any moment. She glanced at it, and the 9-headed lion, which was ready to go, froze immediately, and buried its head behind Fu Kang's back. The whimper sounded like a cat. Xuanyi chuckled softly with a chick. The arrogant suddenly turned his head, his dark eyes were like ice, staring at her without any kindness. Are all of Zongshan's dragon god lineages like you? He asked slowly. Xuanyi looked at him with a smile. Of course not, I'm the one who talks the best. Unexpectedly, a smile appeared on Fu Kang's icy face, just like his eyes, without any kindness. It was a better choice for you to leave directly that day. Uncharacteristically, he was no longer silent. Since you stayed, don't regret it. Xuanyi covered his mouth with his sleeve, and said lightly, Senior brother's words are so mysterious. Is it possible that the Hwasu clans is trying to crowd out his colleagues and punish his heart with his words? Fu King looked away from her face, and said coldly, Hwasu must take revenge, the princess must remember. Xuanyi took another step forward, and the palace door opened silently at some point, and the gatekeeper fairy boy was looking at them curiously with rounded eyes. Zuyan's temperament is very magnanimous. Brother, we are really a match made in heaven. Xuanyi sent him a charming look, and stepped into the hall. Maybe it was too early, and it took a long time to come out after leading the fairy boy to pass the message, and said apologetically, Shenjun Fukeng, Princess Xuanyi, the emperor just got up and hasn't washed yet. I'm afraid you will wait for a long time, let me take the place of the second, lead the way to the disciples' courtyard. I can't afford to sleep until Chenchi, this emperor is really leisurely. Xuanyi was about to leave when she suddenly saw several gods walking into the hall talking and laughing. The dazzling auspicious light illuminated the entire dark hall of Mingxing. Her eyes began to hurt again, so she had to cover her face with her sleeves. Seeing her appearance, the guiding fairy boy couldn't help reminding her softly, "Princess, this is not proper manners." Before finishing speaking, the voice of goddess Hixi came from behind, "Princess Xuanyi, from today onwards we will be colleagues." The princess covered her face with her sleeves when she saw us. What is the meaning of this? Xuanyi put down his sleeves, bowed gracefully, and said softly, "You brothers are full of divine power, and the auspicious light is so dazzling that I dare not look directly at you. I hope you brothers will forgive me." Raising his eyes, he met the unfriendly eyes of goddess Shang's Hixi. Oh, is she so annoying? She thought for a while, then suddenly bowed and saluted, "Senior Sister Xiang, you're being polite." Goddess Hixi's expression changed immediately, "What did you call me?" Xuanyi was full of apology, "Sorry, I couldn't remember the name of the senior sister." The guide fairy boy beside him hastily introduced in a low voice, "Princess, this is your second senior sister, Goddess Hixi, she is a descendant of the Xiang family." "There is Xiang's, yes." Xuanyi gave the gloomy Hixi a sincere and apologetic smile, "Senior sister's Hixi's name is really nice, and she lives up to her name." Hixi turned her body away, as if she didn't hear her. Xuanyi ignored her for now, and turned his eyes www.mtlnovel.com to look at the gods in the hall one by one. Counting carefully, she and Fu King are not counted. There are 4 disciples here. Tai Yao and Hixi have met before, and the remaining 2 disciples, a man and a woman, are very unfamiliar. The most important thing is that these 2 people look at each other going up, and Fu King seemed to be old acquaintances, talking and laughing happily, very affectionate. Xuanyi lowered his head, and asked the guiding fairy boy in a soft voice, "Who is that person in the green robe talking to God Fu King?" The fairy boy who led the way immediately introduced to her generously, "That is the 6th senior brother of the princess, the of Guting, he is the 3rd son of Hua Wang, and I heard that he has known him since childhood, and he has been talking to the emperor every day for these years. Want him to take God Lord Fu King under his seat." It turned out to be Hua Wang's 3rd son. The last time she and Fu King first met in the garden of the Queen of Flowers, they almost picked the mother-in-law peonies. This incident caused the Emperor of Flowers to ask Zhongshan directly, but fortunately, it was settled by Qi Nan later. No wonder Fu King threatened her so arrogantly before. It turns out that he has acquaintances here, and they are still related to the same enemy. Who is that goddess in the black dress? Xuanyi's eyes fell on the goddess in black dress beside the god of Guting. She was tall and slim, and she only wore a simple black dress. It needs to be more beautiful, but it seems that the 2 of them are quite harmonious, unlike Hixi who sees her and is on edge. "That's your 9th senior sister, the daughter of the Snake Emperor of Tuxiang Mountain, Princess Fuluo." Leading Xian Tong smiled ambiguously, "She and the god of the Guting just got engaged, and they worshipped under the emperor's throne together, it's a good story." It seemed that Xuanyi was muttering and whispering non-stop, and looked over here from time to time, but senior brother Taiyao still put on the appearance of a senior brother, stepped forward and smiled and said, "Little sister, why don't you come to see me? See the other senior brothers." Xuanyi greeted him with a smile, with a sweet voice, "I saw that the seniors were talking happily, so I didn't dare to interrupt. Senior brother Gu Ting, senior sister Fu Luo, please be polite." The 2 gods were indeed the ones who hung up on Fu King. They nodded indifferently, and didn't even look at her. Tai Yao smiled slightly, "So you recognize it? I'm about to introduce it." Xuanyi nodded, "How can I say that I am also a disciple under the seat of the master, and the identities of the senior brothers naturally need to be understood. After all, we will all be colleagues in the future, and we should treat each other with sincerity. Princess, Gu Ting dare not agree with what the princess said. Guting Shenjun suddenly straightened his expression and turned around. He was of medium stature, and wore a simple green robe that was clean and upright. Different from the casual trend that is rising nowadays, his long hair is all meticulously, which looks a little rigid, but his standing posture is tall and straight, and there is a sense of elegance and integrity in his gestures. He seemed to be close to him, but now he looked at Xianyi rather sternly with repulsion on his face. My Huawang Yao clan and Zuyan clan have never had any grudges, but the princess first threw the handkerchief into the cloud pool, and then tried to get her hands on the whirling peony. It's just a joke, why are you speaking rudely to Fu King again? The slander comes first, provocative in front of the palace, behind, so domineering, without the slightest demeanor of the gods. Don't you feel ashamed when you talk about treating each other with sincerity today? Xianyi shook his head, I don't think so. Absurd. Gu Ting frowned, even if the master has accepted you as a disciple, I still think that Princess Zuyan's temper is not compatible with Mingxing Palace. The princess said that she treats each other with sincerity, so she shouldn't be so arrogant. If the princess still insists on treating her colleagues in the old way, she will probably disappoint Emperor Zhongshan with a piece of the most precious dragon scale. Oh, you mean if everyone doesn't like her, she won't be around for a few days? I have chosen the courtyard for you. Gu Ting Shenjun led Fu King and turned to leave. It's an elegant place, you must like it. As soon as he left, the other gods in the hall followed immediately. Only Tai Yao asked gently, would you like to go with me, junior sister? Xianyi smiled and said, brothers, please go first, Xianyi will arrive later. It is said that because Emperor Baizi believed in the natural way that one life is two, two begets three, and three begets all things, the 33,333 halls of the Pantheon Temple are exactly the number of three. What's even more subtle is that within these 30,000 palaces, the buildings of each of the small halls coincide with the number of three. For example, Emperor Baizi's Mingxing Palace has 300 courtyards. With so many courtyards, the disciples can naturally choose the one they like to use. Xianyi followed the guide Xiantong all the way through at least 10 courtyards that looked quite good. Seeing that Xiantong had no intention of stopping, she asked, Xiantong, didn't the disciples choose the courtyards themselves? The fairy boy who led the way was in a bit of a dilemma. Princess, the emperor specifically told me to wait the day before yesterday. The princess's courtyard is designated by the emperor. I think the emperor has his arrangements. Only her? Xianyi stopped talking, and quietly followed behind him, walking along the gravel road full of hydrangeas. On the contrary, the fairy boy who led the way couldn't stop chirping. The princess's courtyard is in the northwest direction, called Tongjing Palace. It's a clean place, the princess will definitely like it after staying for a long time. Tongjing Hall, the name of the former main hall of the exterminated Tongshan clan. Did Emperor Baizi do it on purpose? Xianyi narrowed his eyes slightly. The fairy boy who led the way didn't realize it, and was still excitedly saying, in the past, when goddess Wangshu was still a disciple of the emperor, she always wanted this courtyard because it was very clean, but the emperor was never willing to let her live in it. Here. Well, maybe it's really a good place. Tongjing Palace sounds like a magnificent name. After all, there should be a real palace with a garden pool and a tung forest. Therefore, when the leading fairy boy pushed open the courtyard door, Xianyi was stunned by the scene inside. This is a small, tile-roofed house? 2 half-old and not new tile-roofed houses, withered and yellow hay all over the ground, a slender tung tree planted in the east, and a few fields of dejected wild flowers in the west. The lowest servant of her family has never lived in such a place. Goddess Wangshu wants to live here? Liar! The fairy boy who led the way saw her push open the door without saying a word, hurriedly stepped on his short legs to follow, and introduced enthusiastically, Princess, this room is the study room, and the bedroom is the one next door. I will wait for the daily meals on time. Don't worry about the supply, the princess. Every day, the emperor starts teaching at the time of Chen and ends at the end of the day. In the Hid Hall in Gensi, the princess walks along the hydrangea, and you can see it soon. If the princess feels tired and wants to relax, as long as the emperor doesn't during the lecture, you can enter and exit the Mingxing Hall at will, and you can also go to the garden in the south. The emperor's disciples like to rest and talk there, and the princess will definitely like it. Before she finished speaking, she saw Xuanyi touching the half-worn table and chairs, then the simple moon window, and finally looking at the cornered bookshelf where there were not many books. Her eyes slowly turned red. The fairy boy who led the way suddenly panicked, and said anxiously, "Princess? Are you homesick? Here, you will definitely like it if you live in it." Xuanyi stared at him with tears in his eyes. "Is there anything to eat? I want freshly fried jujugiwen tea, the tea leaves should be 1 inch long. I also want agate white jade cake, the kind that doesn't have bean skin in the stuffing." It turned out to be hungry. The requirements are still so high. The kind-hearted fairy boy immediately went out to look for food for the noble Princess Zuyan, finally got all the food she wanted, and returned to the courtyard. This time it was his turn to be stunned. The simple courtyard was completely buried under the extremely thick ice and snow. The graceful Princess Zuyan rebuilt 2 brand new ice palaces on the ice layer, and sat on the ice chair with white snow to hold the ice. Out a flower. Seeing Xiantung's green face, she smiled slightly, and gently put the flower squeezed out of the snow into the small pocket on his chest. "Thank you www.mtlnovel.com. This is for you to play with." The princess exhaled like blue. Xiantong was a little flustered. "Princess, you are like this, you can't do this." How could she change one of the 300 courtyards of Mingxing Palace into this appearance without authorization? Xuanyi looked innocent. "I added a little ice and snow, can't I?" "Is this adding a little ice and snow?" Seeing the emperor, I'm afraid he will blame the princess. Xiantong brought out Emperor Baizi to scare her. "I'll change it back when my husband blames me." Xuanyi leisurely poured a cup of tea, took a sip. The tea was good, it really was the freshly roasted 99 Giwen tea by Yi Kun Chong. I took another bite of the agate white jade cake, it was so fragrant and soft, it was indeed an authentic agate white jade cake without bean skin. Taking a sip of tea, a sip of cake, and looking around at the world of ice and snow, Xuanyi suddenly felt that it would be a pleasure to come out and pay homage to a gentleman. "By the way, I don't like the name of Tongjing Palace." She looked at the plaque hanging on the door of the Ice and Snow Palace as if remembering something. "I changed the name, and this courtyard will be called Ice and Snow Palace from today on." Xiantong sighed and stomped his feet, racking his brains to try to persuade him, but suddenly he felt a violent tremor on the ice under his feet, which almost made him fall heaten, and then he saw a bright flame shooting out from under the ice layer. Sheng Sheng broke through the extremely thick ice layer to create a huge hole. After the flames rose several feet high, they slowly fell back to the ice surface and gathered into a figure. There was a soft panting sound, the voice of a strange man. "Who froze this place? It almost suffocated me." This sound is very pleasant, soft and warm, like a bowl of hot, sweet and fragrant red bean osmanthus wine stuffed dumplings when it is freezing cold. After all, the who turned into firelight turned around and looked curiously at the surrounding ice and snow world.